So our special guests today are Blake Patton and Dan Ciprari. You know, our topic today is the working relationships from both sides of the investment. That is the investor and the entrepreneur. You know, I met Blake and I met Dan at the ATDC when as the original angel in residence at the ATDC. I don't remember even how long ago that was. And during that time, I got to spend a lot of time with each of them because we were in the same office space, like in the old days. Dan was an entrepreneur in residence. He started a couple of companies and then exited those companies. And he was there really to help other entrepreneurs as an EIR. But most importantly, he was looking to find his next opportunity. Blake at the time was the acting general manager for the ATDC. And really through his network that he had in the past and the new network he was developing in that role and the reputation that he enjoyed, you know, he met some investors that launched him into starting this VC firm called Tech Square Ventures, which, by the way, now is closing out its fund and had a very successful first fund. It's an interesting story on how these two men became partners in a business called Pointivo, which we're going to talk about today. We're going to learn how this happened, and we're going to learn about their 7-year relationship. Just learned from Dan, this is that June, April will be the 7th year. So thanks, Dan, and thanks, Blake, for attending today and helping us out here at Angel Lounge to become better investors.
Thanks for having us.
Do I have you both?
Good to be here. Good to see some old faces here.
All right. I want to start. I thought we could start maybe with Blake. Blake, if you could just give us a little short commercial maybe on Tech Square Ventures, that
Sure.
would be good.
I'd love to. Yeah. So we are an early stage venture firm investing in enterprise and marketplace technology companies out of So since we've founded, I think we've invested in 55 companies out of our early stage funds and also our startup accelerator and innovation program, Engage. As Charlie said, we've recently launched our second fund. We've made our first 3 investments out of that. And so love to connect with any of the companies you guys are seeing that in the enterprise and marketplace technology space. I guess relevant to today too, I should say, so sort of the commercial and the history. I think one of the, so Pointivo and Dan are super special to the Tech Square Venture story. That was our first investment, and we'll tell you a little bit about how that came together. So in many ways, right, you know, we're both co-founders of both of these ventures. So Pointivo was the first.
Well, that was one of the questions that I really had for you to start this off is, how did you become associated, Blake, with Pointivo? I didn't know it was your very first deal. That's interesting. So how did you, so you're sort of the genesis of this idea of Pointivo. So why don't you explain that one? Because I think it's fairly unique and it shows how very early stage first time funds actually work.
Yeah. Well, I think, and Dan can keep me honest on the memory, like you said, it's 7 years ago, but the genesis of Pointivo is really Habib. And so he was a PhD student at Georgia Tech. And as part of his research, he had developed this technology. And really at that time, it was technology, but mostly algorithms to translate video into very accurate 3D models for large scale kind of built environments. So buildings or construction type applications. And I met him through Venture Lab. They were going through the National Science Foundation's I-Core program. And I met Habib and his professor, his PhD sponsor professor, through that I-Core program and kind of became their mentor as they went through that program. And, you know, Habib and I became friends. I was fascinated by the technology. You know, if you rewind back to this is kind of late 2012 timeframe, you know, AI was just emerging, and it was very obvious that there were going to be all these applications for this. That, you know, you would have to not just apply AI to the 2D world, which was most of what we were seeing then, but the 3D world. So kind of dug in with them. And if you're familiar with the I-Corps program, it's really a program that takes university commercialization projects and puts them through a boot camp to try to help them do customer discovery and find, product market fit. In fact, they were one of the first or second cohorts to go through I-Corps. And that was pretty cool because we got to do it directly with Steve Blank and some of the others that had kicked that off. So anyway, as we went through, I got really excited about what they were doing. And I was also thinking about what was I going to do next. I hadn't yet decided to start Tech Square Ventures. And so I started digging in with Habib, and we wanted to start a company around this technology. And I'm sure later we'll talk about, I'm going to skip some of the complicated parts of the story and why it took a year and a half to get to the point where, Dan launched Pointivo. But through that process, we had to, as we were looking at, in fact, back then we called the company Point Forest, which Dan later told me was a terrible name and he changed it. But we called the company Point Forest. I knew when you meet somebody like Habib, right, he was just brilliant. I knew it was going to be a success for a whole bunch of reasons around IP, around some of the complications with the research going on. And Habib, the professor that was involved, wound up leaving Georgia Tech and going to Cambridge. Anyway, a lot of things made it get complicated and slow down. Okay. And so, fast forward to 2014, I decided to start Tech Square Ventures. But along the way, when I was working with them, Dan and I, when you're an EIR, we brought on Mike Hurst to run ATDC. I was figuring out what I was going to do next. And if you're an EIR at ATDC, right, we spent a lot of our time talking about what we were seeing and helping each other think through what we were going to do. So Dan was really kind of my sounding board for looking at Pointivo. So he was already fully up to speed. He had met Habib and
let's switch to this then. Let's switch to Dan then. Yeah. Dan, so why Pointivo? You had a lot of, I remember when we were back then, you were looking at a lot of deals.
Yeah.
Why this Pointivo? What was the attractiveness there that made you settle out? Because you've been in this game before. It's a long-term deal, man.
Yeah.
You just don't you don't stick your toe in the water, you jump in.
No, and like said, when you're an EIR, you're working together on not only helping the company you're supposed to be helping, giving input to each other or advice, but also when something comes up that one of you is interested in, you use someone as a sounding board. And Blake and I had become friends and trust each other's judgment. And so I was excited about Pointivo for Blake doing it, right? That was 2012, probably that time frame. And I remember walking in his office, seeing a presentation on the table with Point Forest and all the bullet points of why it was the opportunity to do, and should he do it or should he not? And as we get into some of the messiness around it, ultimately ended up causing him not to do it. And that was a good year, though. So I saw at least a year, maybe even a year and a half.
Did you say it caused you, the analysis caused you not to do it?
No, this is Blake. Blake decided not to do it for sort of there was some hair around the deal and some other things, which we'll talk about. And Habib hadn't graduated, and there's all kinds of things that basically made him not do it. So I said, great, Blake, it's a good thing you should do if it works out, because it wasn't something I was even considering. But he put it on hold, decided not to do it, then later did his own thing. So it was a good year to year and a half from that point to when the opportunity came back up to say, well, Habib's going to graduate. The messiness had gone away a little bit. And I was at a point after 2 years of being an EIR that it was a good time for me to really consider it.
After you saw, Dan, that it was you really saw that there was some real patented technology there, and Blake was able to kind of pull it out of Georgia Tech. There's two people involved. We're talking about relationships here. So the two people involved, the first one involved is the guy that you're going to work with day to day, which was Habib. Yeah. You had, if you could address, what were you you first have pause there, but what made you relax and say this could work with Habib? And then you had to deal with, I'm going to have this Blake guy in. I like Blake and we get along and all that. It's easy to have a beer. It's another thing to sort of be married in an investment for a while. So how did you sort through that?
Yeah. So Charlie, you and I have talked before about the fact that, I had some pretty strict criteria if I was going to do something next. And as you said, I had looked at a number of opportunities and spent probably 4 to 7 weeks with some other CEOs during my 2-year stint, spent 40, 70 hours a week, seeing if that was the opportunity I wanted to go help him with. And none of those worked out. So I came up with pretty strict criteria. One was it had to be truly innovative, something different and new, not just something a little bit better. Had to be huge market opportunity, really defensible with strong IP, and then the perfect co-founder. And I think Blake could figure it out.
What was the last one?
Perfect co-founder. Perfect co-founder.
Perfect co-founder.
Easy. That's easy, right? but Blake,
I like.
Blake could figure out the first three, right? I mean, it was a big market opportunity. There was some IP. There was to be more, and it was really different. No one was doing anything like it. So those were, I pretty much accepted those. Just making sure I had the perfect co-founder. And Habib and I it probably took 6 months from the time that I said, this is something I really want to pursue. And Blake, was agree it made sense for us to do, to when we actually started it. And so Habib and I had 6 months of getting to know each other, talking through things, doing some customer discovery, doing a lot of things together, for me to feel comfortable that he was someone that I'd want to, marry for the next however many
years. Was there something that was there some event or something that happened with Habib that turned the corner for you that said, this is good?
No,
we always have concerns as we're getting into long-term relationships, and they're either those concerns continue to show themselves and we rationalize them away, or what we do is things just sort of get better, right? And it makes sense. Was there some turning point where you just said, I'm in with Habib?
Habib's a unique person. Like he is great to begin with. And so sure, absolutely, I'm going to check everything, but super smart. You can figure that out pretty quickly. I mean, super, super smart. You get a level of understanding of ethics, challenge that at times, make sure it's there. You got to go out and have a cocktail with them, make sure that, he's social and be fun, and get him around your family and just all the different avenues. He's a great individual. So very fortunate, Charlie.
So you did some serious relationship due diligence here.
Yeah. Dan, I would probably add to this, part of, and I know we're going to talk about some of the challenges, but one of the challenges Habib had, and I think one of the things that led to the trust that Dan and Habib had with each other was, we went through a struggle around both the IP, an external company that had sponsored that information. His professor and PhD sponsor had left, which is a really big deal when you're a year away from getting your PhD. And Habib was from Iran, so we had this big immigration challenge, and because so Habib had kind of grown to trust me because I was the one that didn't leave in that whole equation, and then Dan, because Dan was helping us, and so part of that period of building the relationship that I think between Habib and Dan, I think it's we talked to a few people when we were talking about trying to find Habib a co-founder, but there was this trust and respect. We were trying to help Habib regardless if we wound up building this company. And so I think, and so Dan was a big part of that. And so there was this trust between them already because we were trying to help Habib, period, whether it turned into Pointivo or not. One of Habib's options, one of his safer options would have been just to go into academics, right? It would have solved the immigration problem, would have made a lot of things easier for him.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's non-trivial.
But the other side of this is, I'm wondering from Dan's point of view, is he knew you and you guys were talking about this for a while. But at some point, he got comfortable with Habib. Then he had to get comfortable with you as sort of the lead investor on this deal, right? So was there another hurdle there as far as your relationship went with Blake? What were you expecting from him?
I think we've all been through this before. When you're on the investor side or the entrepreneur side, right? There's two different hats you wear, and right. They can be, they conflict at times. And so it was funny because Blake was on the entrepreneur side as he was looking at it, and we're side by side, and then he's got to move over to the investor side. And I mean, we both recognized it. We knew. I think there's times I was like, Blake, dude, you're talking as an investor. It's really annoying right now. Just like making sure we all knew perspectives that we know where we're coming from. And I've been on both sides of the deal, and just kind of grounding ourselves and saying, all right, this is what we have to get through. So, I mean, it was I would say it was challenging, but because we both had both perspectives, it was not like a personal thing at all.
But how challenging was it for you, Blake, to kind of integrate Dan into this deal. Okay. So now I'm talking a little bit more towards not only I know you did the introduction, you introduced Dan to Habib and you kind of got that going, and Habib trusted you and Dan trusted you. I mean, it was great the way it came together, but then there's the hard part. Okay. Dan wants to know what's my deal if I come into this thing, right?
Yeah.
So this is the first test of relationship is, can we get through this first negotiation? How did that go?
Yeah, look, it was both really hard and really easy. And it was really hard because I liked and respected Dan and Habib so much. And then the ex-entrepreneur in me had to recognize that I was, I needed to sort of let go. I wasn't the person that was going to build this company. I wasn't the founder. Those guys were going to be the founders. And that wasn't easy. And Dan was awesome because he recognized that. But I think two things. One is when we sat down and decided it was the right decision, there were a lot of things that drove what Dan's quote unquote deal would be, which meant solving for Georgia Tech and it meant solving for some of the other IP issues. And what was left, the way we handled it, is really basically coached Dan and Habib to talk to each other about it. And I gave Habib some guidelines, to make sure he understood what was normal, and kind of let them determine out of that percentage of the equity that could be, for the team, let them, figure that out. And but look, so the other thing I should add here is Dan was also investing, and Dan was, because of his prior success, had this ability to jump in and build this company. Dan, for all the angels on the phone, right? Dan's like the prototype CEO you want. He had the vision, he had the commitment. Barely paid himself for most of the company's lifetime. He's invested personally. And so there was just I think an enormous amount of trust. And I think we didn't really have to feel like we were negotiating with each other as much, because the bigger go, no-go negotiations were really with sort of third party. So it was like we were on the same side of the table. It was really about figuring out, could we work out the IP deal, and could we get this other company that potentially had a claim on the IP to come along for the ride. And so I think that made it a lot easier.
And that's that 6 month.
How about
period.
you, Dan? What's your perspective on that? Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it was a interesting starting period, because it was a 6 month process to get through those challenges that Blake talked about. And it wasn't really me and Blake as much as, or me and Blake negotiating with each other as much as us trying to figure out how to make it start. And that was challenging, but we thought it was worth it. So.
Yeah, but I know that, being an ERI, I know that you looked at other people and other deals, right, to try to get into, and they didn't work out.
Yeah.
They thought, oh, he's way too greedy, or you're thinking that guy's way too greedy. He doesn't understand the value that I'm bringing to the table and all that. So I guess that initial relationship that you had with Blake, plus your investing experience and exit experience, really helped pull this whole thing together.
Yeah. And I think
it's good that Habib was so cooperative and trusting for you guys to make it all sort of work, because he could have blew it up. These things are easy to blow up. They're hard to bring together.
Well, I think he might have been able to, we might have been able to take advantage of him, honestly, because he had not started a company before. He's just coming out with his PhD, but he's such a good person.
Yeah.
That, neither Blake nor I would do it anyway, but you wouldn't do it to him, so I'm glad he got in a situation where he wasn't going to take advantage.
Yeah, but there's the other way. He could have done it to you, because all he needs is one guy in his court that you don't even know about, who's telling him, man, this is what you should get. And then he's the guy that blows the whole thing up, right? Because he's getting bad advice, right? It's very difficult. There's a lot of trust in all of this relationships that happen. And
I will tell you that I will say that I fully knew and expected Blake to be giving Habib advice, right? He should be serving. I don't think there's anybody else he could have trusted Blake. And I knew the advice you were going to give him anyway, but it's like, yes, talk to Blake, see if he thinks it's fair. And by the way, from my perspective, for Habib and me, I was like, I'll just split everything. It was just, it wasn't going to work with how both of us doing it. And so we've always kept everything.
Yeah, right.
That always makes it easy.
Well, what do you do? The other thing that happens in this deal, which was unique with this particular deal, is you had really great technology. I love it where Blake says, I mean, it was obvious that AI is going to be the future here. And I'm sitting here going, wasn't to me. Okay. So it's great. But that's why you're such a prophet, and such a great VC, I guess, Blake. You kind of you're seeing way over the dashboard. But the thing that happens when you have great technologies like this is you're in search of the market, right? So it's such great technology, it works everywhere, which means it works nowhere because you got to focus in on something. And there's always this friction that happens when are we going to get to revenue? When are we going to settle on something? When are we going to focus on this thing? How did you guys, from both your perspectives, individually speaking, how did you work through that? Because it's a frustrating process because it just takes money to get there.
Yeah, I think, there's never an obvious answer. Like it wasn't clear there was one way to go. You have to add in other complexities that it did just come out of academia. So it didn't really work yet. It was the core stuff worked, but any practical wasn't there yet. And so we had a good year and a half of actually making it so that it was something useful in the world. And then along those lines, trying to figure out where it would apply, what markets were ready. So it definitely was a challenge. Blake got to live through all of that. We all thought, in 4 years ago, we would have had millions and millions in revenue because the application was there and the technology was there. And that took 4 years to get to that point. It's really been 2 years.
Yeah, but do you get to a point though, Dan, where you've got your investors coming in? I'm sure you had board meetings, monthly, maybe bi-monthly? I'm sure it's fairly frequent, right? Because you're just burning money at this point. Yeah. That's where I'm talking really to the relationship between you and Blake specifically, and not how did you solve the problem in getting to the right market, but how did you work? How did that affect your relationship on the way to getting to the right market?
Yeah, Blake, that'd be interesting. Get your perspective on that from the board side.
Yeah. Okay, Blake, what do you say?
So I think Dan and I knew we were signing up to start an atypical startup. I think we knew that this was a startup that was going to have a long R&D period. We also knew that the big bet we were taking was a market timing bet, and we weren't really sure what that meant. And as Dan said, we had the algorithms and the core ability to do this, but we didn't quite know which markets we were going to go after. We were looking at construction because that's where Habib's research had been, and we had a whole bunch of ideas. But I guess two learnings that I would share with this group. One is there is no more capital efficient CEO in Atlanta than Dan, and it's amazing on what we got done on how little capital, because of how he managed it and how really just religious he was about us having a thesis about which market opportunities we were looking at and which ones we weren't, and really working on the product roadmap alongside that. And then second, I think the company benefited from being innovative technology because we made a lot of progress on grant funding, so non-dilutive funding. So that's the first thing. Second thing, I think, we did have those monthly board meetings. And again, this has been all the way to today, the investors we have in the company today, it's always been very collaborative. I think we all, we didn't sit around and tell Dan, how come you haven't figured this out? We were all kind of trying to figure it out with him. And so, and then about, I'd say 2 or 3 years ago, we knew that finally the timing was there. We saw all these potential customers going from doing things that felt like pilots to talking about making it part of their offering. And, we can talk more about this later, but, Dan had figured out a great go-to-market strategy around channel partnerships with the drones. And today they're they have all of the major drone providers. They're the platform for all of those. And so I think the biggest lesson for this group was, you can be right about the market opportunity, but you also have to be right about the timing. We were slightly early on the timing, but that actually benefited us because now we have a really solid IP and technology moat that would be hard to beat. And I think part of what when you see Dan answering these questions, the original IP, out of the what's today, Dan, 16 patents?
16 patents. Yeah.
16 patents. We're talking about one piece of what's now 16 pieces, right? So the amount of progress that's been made since that, founding point. But look, I think what you're asking is spot on. And so we weren't frustrated with Dan because Dan was doing all the right things. And we all had this strong belief, and we saw it, and we were all convinced, the market opportunity.
Right. So that's your side, that's your side. What about Dan's side in this process? Because it's one thing to say, oh yeah, we were all working on it. He was working on it full time. Yeah. You were thinking about it. Okay. Right. So we're always like from your side, and what kind of pressure was there in those meetings? What's that, Blake? What's that, Blake?
I was laughing. You're right. We were
Blake
showing up at
whiteboard. Froze up for us.
Yeah. But Charlie, I worry about running out of money every single day, and Blake knows that. And they were telling me, Dan, don't worry about it. I'm like, I worry about it every single day. So I think.
So what about?
Charlie, you broke up for a second for me. What'd you ask?
Yeah, I thought you saw that Blake's still a little frozen there. But I say for you, Dan, it's like from your side, it's one thing to have these sort of whiteboard types of things. I've been on Blake's side, okay, where I love to come in, love to whiteboard what the opportunities might be, get your feedback, improve on your suggestions, and go get them, Dan, right? So how does Dan feel in the midst of those how does Dan feel, one, in the meetings that go on like that, which I call Monday morning strategy meetings, okay? And then because they change every week. And then secondly, how does Dan feel about Blake, after Blake and the board leaves the room?
Yeah,
how does that affect your relationship?
Yeah, there's been zero issue around any of that, Charlie, actually. I think I was, one point I was annoyed about monthly board meetings because it was, it took time to prep for them, but realistically, it's a good sanity check. And it makes me not forget that I need to raise my head up and try and explain things and where we are and look and the progress we're making, whether we're going the right direction. So even if I didn't have a board meeting, I wish I would do that myself, but in reality, I never would. And so having a board meeting allowed me to do that. And they've been involved. Blake's been involved for 6.5 years now from day one. Our newer investors been on for 2 to 4 years. So they know it. They know what's going on. And I try and remind them of background because they don't live it every single day. When we say, hey, here's what I think we got to do, try and say, hey, remember like the last year before that, this just give you some background because you guys aren't thinking about this every day. But we've had no issue with it, honestly. And I don't think I've ever.
But I guess one of the things that really helps is that how, as Blake says, how efficient you were with capital. I think something that could put a lot of pressure on as an investor, what puts a lot of pressure on me is when you see somebody, you're not ready to spend capital, but the seat is sure that it's both a lot of money. That creates a lot of friction in a relationship. So you being efficient with capital has certainly helped. But there is still this thing that says, look, we've been in this thing for seven years. I expected that, we would be further ahead on revenue, and closer to establishing ourselves, because at some point I've got to get out of this deal. All right. Yeah. How did you handle those discussions? And I know you had to have those discussions.
But I have the exact same perspective, Charlie, honestly, right? I'm an investor. I've been committing, I consider myself the biggest investor. Okay. My time, my reputation, my money, my everything. And I'm not, I care immensely about the rest of it. I'm just saying, like, I have all those same concerns. Like, why aren't we going faster? How do we figure it out? I like that the board has those same needs. They have that view of, hey, when are we going to make this a big success? What does big success mean? I think we're all aligned on that. And I like, I'd be okay with them pushing me more on that, but they know I have those same views and same concerns.
The other thing is, along the way, we actually had potential exit opportunities. And what made the board get really excited was, Dan and Habib really, with almost without hesitation, said no. Right, there's this huge opportunity here. Right, we want to keep going, and it's gotten a lot easier in the last 2 years, obviously, because now the revenue is doing well and the company's doing well. But they were right. They were right about that things were about to move forward. And I think what happened was we went from worrying about those opportunities to more, I think our discussions today are all more around go-to-market, around we have, like you said in the beginning, we have too many opportunities, and we have to make some pretty big bets on things like the business model and whether we continue to go to market through these channels, through the drone companies, or whether we go direct to the end customers. So part of it is we kind of got a little bit distracted from we quickly forgot that those first 4 years of worrying about it, because the challenge then became, well, there's clearly an opportunity in front of us, and how do we capture it? I think that's what the last 2 years have felt more like.
Agree.
Well, how do you just talking to you two guys, just this time we're spending together, I feel like I'm talking to somebody who said, yeah, when I met her, we sort of fell in love. It was like love at first sight. It's just been a dream come true. We have my perfect career. We have the perfect kids, it's all just working out. I mean, come on. Was there some point in time where, even Dan or you, Blake, kind of went home and, went to Stephanie and said, when is this guy going to do whatever? Or I just came out of this meeting. Dan goes back to his wife and says, it just drove me crazy today. I mean, how do you work? What can you tell us a story about?
I know it doesn't make.
Might have happened.
Yeah, I know it doesn't make. Yeah, I know
is it a love at first sight and a happy ending? Come on.
Yeah, I know it doesn't make for the most dramatic story, but I think the message here is that throughout this, the question was never confidence in Dan and Habib, right? We knew we had this amazing team. We knew, I mean, it's not just Dan and Habib. These guys hired an incredible team of, I think at one point, Dan, I was probably the only person around the table that didn't have an advanced degree. Everybody had a PhD or a master's degree except me. And so we had this amazing team built. And so there were definitely times where we would have some friction around, either the product roadmap or some of the decisions that Dan and Habib were made kind of at a micro level. And like Dan said, I think the thing that he probably heard more from us than anything was, can't you spend more money to go faster? Can't you spend more, and won't that help? Won't that go faster? But Dan and Habib, super transparent. Those monthly board meetings were more strategy sessions, and they kept us up to speed. We knew everybody they were talking to. So it was really a collective, decision on, is this, are we right about this market opportunity? When is it going to turn? And I think probably to your question of did I ever go home? I do think a couple of the opportunities when people came and said, are you interested in exiting? And Dan would tell us about those conversations. I did go home and think some like, hey, this is hard, and I don't know if the market's going to turn. Maybe we should do that, right? Maybe we should do that. But when you have two passionate entrepreneurs telling you no, let's keep going, you trust them.
And that's what it comes down to, I guess, at one point that as you go through relationships, and this is true whether it be in a marriage or in this situation between an investor and an entrepreneur, is there are those moments where you say, am I going to trust them, right? Am I going to trust them? Are they telling me, or is this against my sort of better judgment, or my intuition? What about you, Dan? What were those friction points for you?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my thing is there's so many challenges with everything, running anything like this. The interaction with the board is so low on my list of concerns, Charlie. It's like hard to even think of it. I feel they're supportive and it's great. So they just don't rise up to the top 5, honestly, at all. I think the only thing, I'll give you like one example. This isn't going to be very exciting, but we hired our first head of sales in August of last year. Like we didn't have anyone running. We had someone running sales, but they weren't the right person. We all knew it wasn't the right person. The board probably told me 8 months earlier, hey, Dan, you really ought to bring in head of sales. And I was like, guys, what is he going to do? What is he or she going to do? Like here, let me tell you, I see every opportunity, I think, in all the channels. And I don't think I can attract someone at the level that we all think we need yet. Like the products weren't ready, which was a year and a half ago. But anyway, so it was just, I was challenged with that going, I don't know if I can do it. Anyway, I give them 6 months. They were 6 months. I should have listened to them 6 months earlier, not a year earlier, but 6 months, because we probably waited 6 months too long. But I bet we had 3 or 4, 5 board meetings like, Dan, it's really time. So, I mean, I still felt I was right during the time. I was probably wrong by 6 months, but it wasn't
but it is interesting that there is that continuing friction between the investors and the entrepreneur, which is, if you had more money, what would you do with it? Can't you move faster? Why don't you hire the sales guy? Even if it doesn't make sense to where you are in the market, well, hire a sales, do something, get it out there, right?
Well, I think I actually think the way that friction comes in is that I am worried about running out of money, because I know what happens when I run out of money and I have to raise money, and it's not a good position, and dilution. And everyone cares about dilution, but I live it every day. And so I think that's probably where there's only any friction of, we should spend it, but I got to make sure I have enough. But of course I have to spend enough.
Did you have to raise more money from people other than Blake and Tech Square Ventures?
Yeah. We did a $4 million Series A February of 2019 with BIP.
And what was your expectation there, that you were going to lead that and you were going to be the person that was going to pull that money in, or was your expectation that this is Blake's job?
I would have loved for it to be Blake's job. But Blake was busy. Now,
so you didn't take that on, Blake, as the lead investor in this deal?
Blake played a big role.
How did you guys work through that?
No, look, we're doing it again. We're doing it again. There'll be another fundraise at some point in the future that we've already started talking about, and we all work on it together. But look, I'm there to help, and both for introductions and like right now even though we're not fundraising now, we're already starting to talk about what is our, how do we start to put our story together. But nobody can raise money for the company except the CEO. And so we support that CEO in doing that. Now, there were definitely, to your friction point, I think part of the way you're asking the question, why we don't necessarily bring up friction, is because it wasn't necessarily friction, but there were definitely points where we had to have hard alignment discussions around what those deal terms would be, and who are the right investors. We have those now, right? We're having those right now in terms of what is the right path and what how to create alignment around that. And it's not friction, because I think we all understand each other's point of view, but they're certainly not simple discussions. So, my view was, if Dan knows for our board, if he needed money and didn't have time to find it, he knows we would go find it. He probably also thinks, and he's probably right, that he can find it at better terms than we would.
I got it. Hey, Dan, do you feel that from an operations standpoint, do you feel that you have the authority to set strategy, and you're the CEO? Do you have the authority to set strategy and even act against what might be the advice or the agreement of Blake? Has that ever come to pass? Because, like you said, one of the examples you gave is he wanted you to hire somebody, a sales manager. The board did, and you said, I didn't. I should have hired him 6 months earlier, but 6 months later than they recommended, right? So that's part of it, so you made a decision to say no. Is that so? How much authority do you feel you have the authority to be the CEO?
I think it's not authority, it's the expectation that they expect me to. Like they want me to stand firm and say, no, it's not right, or yes, it is, and listen to them. And so, so I think there's every expectation that's what I should do. And I think when your question earlier about the board, like my expectation of a board is on the sports side. I guess I've never been involved with one where it's more directed, where they're directing the CEO to do something. I just haven't been in that experience, in that environment. So when you talk about fundraising, I wouldn't expect the board to do that. I would hope that they would help me, connect me, give me advice, be the sounding board. I mean, Blake's got so much experience of people raising money that, I'm going to use them for all of that. But I have to do the work. I mean, it's what I'd have to do every day.
That's the fundraising, but there's the operations side. Like you said, they expect you to kind of run the company.
Absolutely.
But, a lot of times I've been in situations where decisions were being made by the CEO, and I let it go because, look, he's the CEO. I'm a non-executive director here, right? He sees the day-to-day, and I just disagree. It's sort of like, and it impacted my relationship. It's sort of like I felt like he didn't trust me enough, and or maybe I didn't trust him enough, in that regard. Did you ever have any of that?
So Charlie, let me ask you, in that situation that you're talking about, because it sounds like you're talking about a real past situation. Did you feel like you were involved enough and knew enough about the operations and strategy that you were right? Or the fact that CEO might be in it every day and have a perspective that was correct. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I do, and I do know, but in this, I did feel like I was in a situation where an investment where I did feel like I was right, but I knew that I didn't know enough about the market to prove I was right. Yeah. Okay. And that really wound up being eventually what I did is I gave into the CEO. I said, look, at some point you got to say as an investor, look, who's running the show here? And if I'm running the show, I don't need the CEO, right? Yeah. But if you're going to either trust the CEO, you got to at some point step back. And but that's one of those relationship tests, I think, that take place between an investor and a CEO.
Yeah, and the reason I asked you that, Charlie, was to say that if we had a situation where Blake or John or Dan said, Dan, I really don't think you're taking the right direction. I really think we need to do that. We would have that discussion because I don't think I know everything for sure. And I would just, Blake, look, why do you think that? Do you know that much? And Blake may have a level of experience or have some insights I don't have, then I'm probably going to change my mind. I guess that's my perspective on it. But also I'll push him and say, Blake, look, let me tell you the 20 things I'm seeing and why I think this, and tell me if I'm full of shit. And I think that would be my expectations, how we would interact. And I know yours was a unique situation, but that's to kind of have that view of things.
What are your thoughts on this, Blake?
Yeah, look, I definitely have relationships in other companies for what you're describing. I think what's different here is, Dan's not the 20-year-old, entrepreneur, right? Dan's had a ton of success and built a lot of companies. Dan's uniquely good at leveraging us, and it's funny the way Dan just said that, because breaking us. Am I breaking up for everybody else?
I can hear you fine.
Okay,
yeah. Okay, good.
So I think for Dan, I like the way he said it, because it's funny, because that's exactly what he does. Dan communicates pretty well. And when we're brainstorming, if you say something, Dan does not hesitate to say, look, what do you mean by that? And what do you think? And he digs in. So Dan's pretty good at sussing out when we're just thinking off the top of our head versus telling him something that we have that's a building concern. And he mentioned the head of sales. It wasn't just that we were saying hire a head of sales. Our broader concern was for Dan was that he had this huge team of all these brilliant product people and developers. And we were worried for Dan that he was kind of alone in answering this go-to-market and product market question and some of the strategy. And we recognized what you said. We were showing up every month giving him advice, but we wanted another senior person on the team. And we certainly wanted it to be the head of sales. So part of what we were telling him too was not just hire a salesperson. We were saying hire a head of sales because we wanted to get another senior, business person on the team. And I think that it wasn't friction at all, but that was a good example of Dan. We went through a couple of cycles of Dan saying, what do you mean and why? And what does that person look like? And what am I going to get out of that person? And, hey, I don't know, can you help me find that person? So I think we just iterated through it, but but I know what you're describing. And I think fortunately in Pointivo, we benefit from Dan's experience, and Dan is not shy in calling us out when he thinks there might be a disagreement.
Thanks for that. I just got a couple more questions. One is, it's a personal question. And so you guys have known each other now for a long time. I mean, you've been in this deal for 7 years. You knew each other 2 years prior to that, I think. Okay. So, how have you come out on the other side of this? Where are you guys today in your relationship?
I think it's great. I think we're both too busy to hang out. That's the problem. But I know I couldn't. I mean, it's just in reality, right? Blake's doing so much stuff, and I'm doing so much. But I think it's all been positive in building upon the relationship all along.
Yeah, I would would back Dan again in a heartbeat. And he's right. I think age of our kids and everything else, what used to be more time together, now it's, hey, let's grab a drink at the hotel across the street after the board meetings. And we should work at his annual Super Bowl and Christmas parties. But yeah, I think a lot of trust there, a lot of history, and just a ton of respect. I think part of what you're digging at that's just different about this situation is all of us stayed in a state where we had such high conviction that there was this huge opportunity here. And we stayed in a state of having high conviction around the team. And so I definitely have companies where, Charlie, exactly what you're talking about is the issue, and that there's friction and that those dynamics. So, we've
it's a breakdown of trust is what it comes down to.
Trust. So I think what we just never lost was trust. And even when we've disagreed and we've had to go through iterations of it, never really lost that trust. And so the frustrations are usually, the second, on the investor side, you second guess yourself sometimes too, right? So these go-to-market decisions have been the hardest things for us, right? And so I know when we were deciding for the drone channels, I was a little bit worried about losing direct contact with the customers. Early in our history, there was kind of two directions we could go. One direction that looks like what Hover is now, and I was a little bit more inclined to go, in that direction, and I was wrong. And but we worked through it, and we went in the direction we went, but we never got there. I think with anybody in the boat saying, I got steamrolled, right? I mean, I think everybody said we had this discussion, and this is where we're going. But in the end, I think look, you gotta be right about market opportunity. You gotta be right about the team and people, and the best way to help a company succeed is to help that team succeed. And so that's what I try to do for Pointivo and others. And Pointivo, we at Tech Square Ventures, I think the way you help them succeed is, their go-to-market strategies and helping them connect, with customers and market opportunities. And and Pointivo, that's been I've learned as much from this as they've got, probably learned more from this process than they've gotten out of me, because we've had to pioneer such a new category and a new go-to-market strategy around Pointivo. So, it hasn't been frustration. It hasn't been friction. I think our relationship and the trust is only stronger. Certainly my,
So what about, let me ask you this. So what about, last thing is just, what advice would you give to angel investors to make sure that that they want angel investors, and also maybe from an entrepreneur standpoint there, Dan, is so that they wind up being excited about being in business together and wanting to have a beer and go to the Super Bowl party over at Dan's house. I mean, how do you make sure that happens over a 5 to 10 year period, really?
I'll give you my perspective, because again, being an angel investor as well, I think of it, first of all, when you're investing, do you want to do that or not? Because I have investments where I don't really need to love the CEO, and I trust that the opportunity is good enough and they'll get somewhere, and I may or may not make money, and I haven't in a lot of cases. But if you really do want to have a level of involvement and have that relationship, that's like anything else, right? You've got to get to know them, make sure you guys are compatible. And, independent of the work situation, you have to be compatible. The work's only going to add stress. And so it's got to be, you've got to be two people that could go hang out independent of all of us and mutually respect each other. And then if you have that, then you throw the challenges that are going to come in from, you giving money or taking money, and then things working out or not working out. That's just going to add stress to it. So I think just the base has to be there.
Yeah, I would say two things. If I summed it up in one word, it's alignment. And so at every step of the way, when you make the decisions, right, you have to strive for that alignment. Like I said, this one was unusually aligned because Dan, at a personal level, was as invested as we were, financially, in terms of the vision was, his and all that. So that we had an unusual amount of alignment in this that helped. But I think the minute you lose that alignment, you're on a path, right, where you're headed for trouble. And the second thing is that, the trust that you're describing, Charlie, whether it's trust in their abilities or trust in them as people, as soon as you lose that, you better start fixing it, whether that means, get in the room and battle it out, or, make changes to the team, because, you're not going to get there if once you lose that. One of you is going to fall off the boat unhappy, when you're in that mode. So that does
cut both ways. It does cut both ways.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think we're
trust
headed.
And abilities and trust and character is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, we're headed the next step for Pointivo. This one felt, because I was so much part of the founding, and, I've been chairman since day one, but, Pointivo's next step in the journey is probably not me, right? It's the leadership from the investment side is probably going to be somebody else that's better at taking the company for that next step. And that's going to be, another awkward transition. I think Dan will understand that and probably help be a psychologist through it. But, it's hard as an investor, to let go and recognize, just like in the very beginning, I had to hand it over to Dan. And so, you definitely go through that, but those are all the good, those are the good problems, right? When it's the bad problems you described, I think you gotta get on it, because that's a problem. And yes, it cuts both ways. Sometimes you are the problem, or the company, the only way for the company to succeed is for you to accept that they're going in the direction you disagree with, and you just have to decide what that means for you. But, standing in the middle and, blocking everything doesn't help anybody.
Yeah, but it's not the direction that they go, and you can't stand in the middle. It's not about the decision and the strategy. It's about really maintaining the relationship in the midst of a disagreement, which is very difficult to do. But let me open it up to questions here. You guys have been great. What do we have, Brad?
So not too many questions. One thing I did just want to ask you real quick, Charlie, would it be all right if Frank shared some insight, just given his nature of knowing both Blake and Dan pretty well?
Are you kidding me? We would welcome that. Come on, Frank, talk to us.
I just wanted to say, as I was listening to Charlie, he's so great at digging in. If you're not watching his Charlie Paparelli show, the interviews with entrepreneurs are amazing. Charlie, you're so good at this, at talking to them. What I keep hearing Charlie say is he's looking for this friction. And I'll tell you something about both of these guys. The reason it sounds so good and it's so easy is they both really are superstars. Blake has got this ability, and Charlie was getting at it, to go into Georgia Tech and to get IP off the shelf. Even if it has gone through I-Corps, you've got a professor who's never going to quit his job, and there's no company yet. And if he gets the company, he doesn't want to give up the equity, and he's grant funded. And I see it over and over. So number one, anybody can make anything and patent anything. Selling it is the hard thing. So on Blake's side, he's done this with Cypress. He's done this with Pointivo and others. And it is a skill that is hard to pull off. But finding somebody like Dan, who is an investor, is an entrepreneur. Blake was an entrepreneur. It's like a chemistry experiment that gets perfect balancing. And without one, you don't get the other. No Dan, no Pointivo, no Habib, no Pointivo. No Drew Lanham at Cypress, really, it wouldn't go like it's gone. But also Drew couldn't do anything without Brian Mann, who's a genius. But Blake coming together and knowing all sides and finding a really talented CEO is the difference between getting it off the shelf. If you look at the GRA, they fund all of these things over and over and over. If you look at their report, there are just thousands of them that don't come out of the lab. So I just wanted to say, it seems easy because Blake's got this incredible skill set and talent, and he's found super talented CEOs that happen to be EIRs at the time. But it's just, to me, the reason why it works is both of them are aligned, like Blake was saying. Anyway, I don't know if that helps.
What is it that, okay, so speak to Dan.
Not the usual case is my point.
Spoke to Blake. But you spoke to Blake. Speak to Dan and his experience and his unique gifts.
So my point is, I thought, sorry about that. I thought I was saying, without Dan and without a CEO who's super talented, it doesn't go anywhere. So that, to me, it is an equation, but without the CEO who can really get the funding and move it and scale the team, there's plenty of ideas and plenty of things at ATDC that don't go anywhere, and plenty of stuff on the shelf at Georgia Tech. So it's not, the brilliant scientist with the technology and the IP is essential, but it goes nowhere if you can't sell it and scale it and make it a company. And so you have to have both. And so getting Dan.
Look at the elements that you're speaking to, Frank, is that it's not only the skills, it's not only the market, it's not only the experience that these two men have, but there's something that they have, which I've always admired in both of them. And they have a level of maturity and emotional intelligence that I rarely see in people. I think you guys are pretty amazing. I'm emotionally charged kind of guy, and I've come at both of you and saying some things, and you always have this way of settling me down. You say like, well, let's take a minute here. Okay, let's talk this through. And then we wind up having a real conversation, So I've admired you both for many, many years,
yep.
And I think that goes past. So that transcends skills and experience.
Thank you, Charlie.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Anything else, Brad? And anybody else want to jump in with a question?
As he thinks about questions, one thing I'd add to what Frank said, Frank plays a unique role for the other angels at ATDC too. Is a lot of times, the founder, the catalysts at ATDC are so focused on helping that CEO that they're really just seeing that view. And Frank has always been unique, I think, in the ATDC world, and that he kind of, he gets it and he sees both sides, and he's got the relationships with both sides. And I think he's been his counsel in some of those scenarios that you're describing, Charlie, can be very helpful. So I would encourage the angels on this call to use him as a sounding board on that.
That's good advice. Yeah, Frank, you have seen a ton, baby. Stuff that works and stuff that just has not worked.
Where Blake is doing this hard science, and the idea that you'll find the perfect CEO and you'll make this happen, you breezed over it, but I see over and over, it just never happens. Unless you get this combination of a Dan and a Blake. It's hard to do, but
absolutely
perfected it. And they're both gentlemen. But what you hear that when he talked about the equity and the fairness and how Dan said he wanted to be fair to the founder. If you're in it for yourself and you're trying, I'm going to get all of this, and it doesn't work. And so that trust is what allows it to work. I love it.
Well, this has been great.
Charlie.
Here. Yeah.
Peter, I may have missed this in the beginning. I apologize if I did, but I was going to ask Dan to just kind of describe the specifics of what Point TiVo does in terms of an example. Like in concept, know it, but I don't what's the
perfect use case for it? We did skip over that. So just conceptually, just real fast, we're using AI and computer vision to automate inspection of assets. So you think about assets or companies that deal with assets like insurance companies, telecom, tower owners, solar industry, they're all dealing with assets and some aspect of some manual processes around it, and we automate those. So real life example, cell tower owners charge carriers based on what they're hanging on the tower, the antennas on the tower, to find out and do an inventory of what they should charge. They spend thousands of dollars sending a climber up who's measuring, checking, coming down, producing a report, or they spend hundreds of dollars sending a drone up. We create a perfect digital twin that gives them all that information and gives them a digital asset internal that gets used across the entire organization. The solar industry, a Sunrun or who would send an installer out or a quoter out to go, an estimator go and climb a roof, measure it, go back and put it in an engineering tool and then do a solar design, or they fly a drone for 20 minutes. By the time they get back, it's all automatically generated for them. That's all our algorithms behind the scenes.
Cool. Thank you.
That's cool stuff. That is cool stuff. Well, this has been a real pleasure. It is wonderful to see, people who fall in love at first sight and then sort of build the perfect family and have the perfect ending. Okay. And I know
we're still waiting for the perfect ending,
which will be a great legacy for the both of you. Okay.
Yeah.
We do have one more question. Oh, go ahead, Blake. Sorry.
No, I was just going to joke and say we're still waiting for the chapter of the perfect ending. So we'll.
Yes. Yes, we are.
One of the question for you guys. How did you avoid the temptation to go into hardware? Did you even consider that?
I had just come out of a hardware company. My last company before being EIR was in the LED lighting space, which I absolutely loved. We were perfect timing in that space, but I got to see all the pains of a hardware world. And so it would have been tough to get me to go that route. And we were just, the drone space, there was 100 drone companies out there because we ended up being founded on mobile capture cell phones. Drones started coming out in the second year. And there were so many companies doing the hardware space. We just very fortunate to stay away from that. Fortunate, and it would have required a ton more money, and I don't think I would have ever done it. Just like I won't do biotech again.
Well, this has been really helpful. The thing that I pull away from this is I see that it's, we sometimes as angel investors, we get blinded by the opportunity. We see a good market or we see a really good product and all that, but it's really people. It's the people who build the value in a business. Okay. As Frank was talking about with, a lot of really advanced IP you can get out of Georgia Tech, but it's people. And it really comes down to, as Blake said, respecting each other and trusting each other. And when you can maintain that through the life of the company, through a liquidity event, that's one of those once in a lifetime kind of success stories that we all want to live. And that's what makes it hard for you, Blake, that you have to do it over and over again, for all of those limited partners that you have in your investment. But Dan, you did a great job, and you too, Blake. Thanks for making us better investors and knowing how to actually interact with our entrepreneurs and our founders. This has been a wonderful, wonderful time together.